I sat in my usual booth at the Silver Fork, raising my hand for water. The waitress turned. It was Jessica, my daughter-in-law, who vanished a year ago. The tray slipped from her hands, crashing to the floor. She was terrified. Bending down to clean the mess, she leaned close. Her voice was a jagged whisper. "Please, don't tell him I'm alive. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community." I didn't gasp. I didn't reach out to comfort her. Decades as a school administrator had trained me to process crises as data points, not tragedies. I simply pulled a pen from my purse, wrote my cell phone number on the back of a receipt, and slid it under my empty water glass. I stood up, left a $20 bill on the table, and walked out of the restaurant without looking back. Anger wasn't loud this time. It was clinical. I wasn't just a mother-in-law dealing with family drama. I was a silent investor evaluating a massive breach of contract. 10 minutes later, my phone vibrated with a text message. We met in the alley behind the restaurant kitchens, away from the streetlights and the security cameras. Jessica was shivering, wearing a frayed jacket over her uniform, looking like a ghost who had wandered back into the physical world. I didn't offer a hug or empty words of comfort. I asked for the facts. And the truth flowed out in a rapid, horrifying sequence of undeniable metrics. My son, Michael, the high-flying tech executive I had proudly bragged about to my friends, was a mirage. He wasn't building software, he was building an empire of fraud. Jessica systematically explained the mechanics of his operation. He had aggressively opened lines of credit in her name, forged her signature on complex loan documents, and siphoned the funds into offshore accounts that she couldn't access. When the debts became insurmountable, he didn't apologize. He threatened to have her arrested for the very fraud he had committed, claiming he had the legal resources to bury her in court. She hadn't run away because she was emotionally unstable, as Michael had told everyone in our social circle. She had run to survive a hostile takeover of her own life. I rubbed my eyes, trying to summon the maternal instinct to defend my child, trying to find some logical excuse for his behavior. But there was only clarity. This wasn't a breakdown. It was a balance sheet. Michael had defaulted on our fundamental agreement of trust. He was a predator. He had manufactured a crisis, framed his wife, and positioned himself as the tragic victim to extract sympathy from our network. My heart turned to ice. I didn't cry. I didn't ask why he would do such a terrible thing. I just opened my mental ledger and started calculating the cost of retaliation. I looked at Jessica, a young woman whose life had been systematically dismantled by my own flesh and blood. "Do you have proof?" I asked quietly. She nodded, pulling a crushed flash drive from her pocket. Everything I could copy before I left the house. I took the drive, feeling the weight of the data it contained. The familial bond I had nurtured for 29 years dissolved in that dark alleyway. Michael thought he had eliminated all his liabilities. He was wrong. It was time for a systematic takedown, and I was going to audit his entire existence. I went home, booted up my laptop, and began the audit. I started by examining Michael's social media presence. It was a masterclass in performative grief. Post after post detailed the agony of his missing wife, accompanied by photos of him looking suitably hollowed out. It was nauseating, but reviewing it was necessary. I needed to understand the scope of his public relations campaign before I dismantled it piece by piece. It is a dangerous trap families fall into, the normalization of cruelty. We are conditioned to ignore the red flags in our own homes, sweeping predatory behavior under the rug of unconditional love. We dismiss manipulation as a personality quirk. We call financial abuse a temporary setback. I had done it myself, glossing over Michael's aggressive entitlement during his teenage years, because it was easier to believe he was just fiercely independent. I had been paying the subscription fee for a version of family that didn't exist, willfully blind to the monster I had funded. That blindness ended when I accessed my own credit reports. I had requested comprehensive statements from all 3 major bureaus. As the pages printed out, the scope of his operation materialized in black and white. His entire tech career, The sleek office space, the expensive car, the lavish lifestyle, it was all financed by fraudulent loans. But he hadn't just destroyed Jessica's credit profile, he had taken out massive lines of credit in my name. I stared at the numbers. Hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, neatly tied to my social security number. He had utilized my excellent credit score to underwrite his fiction. I thought back to Jessica, trembling in the alley. I understood now the invisible chain of the survivor. She hadn't stayed quiet out of weakness. When a predator controls your finances, your reputation, and your reality, running away isn't cowardly. It's a strategic retreat. It is the silent, calculated act of preserving your sanity when the system is rigged against you. She had severed the chain the only way she could, by becoming a ghost and waiting for the right moment to strike back. My son had banked on our silence. He assumed Jessica would be too terrified to surface, and he assumed I would be too blinded by maternal devotion to ever check my own ledgers. He relied on the very empathy he lacked to shield him from consequences. I didn't panic. I didn't call him to scream. I quietly retained a private investigator, a former forensic accountant named Sarah, and handed her the flash drive Jessica had given me, along with my own ruined credit reports. I instructed her to map every single transaction, trace every IP address, and build a watertight case. This wasn't about teaching my son a lesson. This was a liquidation of his assets. I was going to bankrupt his carefully constructed reality, and I was going to do it without shedding a single tear. They weren't shocked by what they'd done. They were shocked that I'd stopped playing along. 72 hours later, Sarah sat across from me at my dining table. She didn't offer empty platitudes or emotional support. She offered rigorous documentation. She had traced the origin of the funds, the offshore routing, and the fake vendor invoices Michael used to launder the borrowed money. But the financial ruin he had engineered for Jessica and me was just the operational overhead. Sarah had uncovered the kill shot. She slid a thick manila folder across the polished oak table. "You need to look at these affidavits," she said, her voice stripped of all emotion, presenting the data exactly as I required. I opened the folder. Inside were copies of life insurance policies I had never seen before. They were massive policies taken out on my life, naming Michael as the sole beneficiary to the tune of $2 million. But it wasn't the existence of the policies that froze the blood in my veins. It was the paperwork attached to them. There were medical affidavits, purportedly signed by me, waiving standard examinations and confirming non-existent health conditions to expedite the underwriting process. I looked closely at the signature line. He had forged my name. It was a skilled forgery, clearly practiced over many hours. The loop of the B in Barbara was nearly identical to my own handwriting, but it was too perfect. 3 years ago, after I retired, I developed a slight, involuntary tremor in my right hand. It wasn't debilitating, but it left a distinct, jagged hesitation on the downward stroke of my signature. Every bank teller and notary I dealt with knew it. Michael didn't. He had copied an old signature, one from before my retirement. The absence of the tremor was glaringly obvious to anyone who knew where to look. The stroke of the B was smooth, arrogant, and entirely fraudulent. He wasn't just embezzling funds to support a lavish lifestyle. He was actively betting on my mortality. He was waiting for me to pass away to collect a massive payout that would wipe out the fraudulent debts he had accrued in my name. I closed the folder. The transition was complete. My son was dead to me. The man wearing his face was an attempted felon. "These documents," I said to Sarah, tapping the folder with my index finger, "constitute wire fraud, identity theft, and insurance fraud. It's a federal matter." "Yes," Sarah confirmed. "The authorities handle cases of this magnitude." "Compile everything into a single, undeniable dossier," I instructed. "I want the digital footprint, the forged documents, the credit reports, and Jessica's testimony cross-referenced. Leave zero margin for error." I didn't feel sorrow for the son I was about to destroy. Michael thought he had outsmarted the world. He had simply underestimated the administrative precision of a woman who had spent 30 years managing liabilities. I picked up my phone to execute the final phase of the plan. It was time to close the account permanently. "Michael," I said when he answered his phone, keeping my tone perfectly calibrated to the warm, oblivious mother he expected. I'm making a pot roast on Friday evening. I'd love for you to come over for dinner. I know you've been having a hard time lately. He accepted immediately, playing the part of the grieving, devoted son with practiced ease. I'd love that, Mum. I really need the company right now. Friday evening arrived with clinical precision. The table was set, the roast was carved, and the wine was poured. Michael sat across from me, detailing the fictional struggles of his tech startup and the lingering pain of Jessica's disappearance. He was a phenomenal actor, but I wasn't an audience member anymore. I was the director of his downfall. Next to my wine glass, my phone sat face down. On the screen, queued up and ready, was the digital confirmation of the police report I had filed that morning, officially handing Sarah's comprehensive dossier over to the fraud division. We reached the dessert course before I initiated the audit. I met with a financial planner this week, I said, taking a sip of wine. I was reviewing my estate, making sure everything is in order for when I pass away. Michael looked up, his expression shifting into a mask of solemn concern. Mom, you don't need to worry about that. You have years left. I know, I replied smoothly, which is why I found it so curious that someone took out a $2 million life insurance policy on me last month. Even more curious that I supposedly signed the medical affidavits. The silence that fell over the dining room was absolute. I watched his eyes dart toward the exits, his brain frantically calculating his exposure. There must be a mistake, he stammered, the smooth executive facade showing its first hairline fracture. A clerical error. I thought so too, I said, leaning forward. Until I looked at the signature. You practiced the loop of the B beautifully, Michael, but you forgot the tremor. My hand shakes. Yours doesn't. The mask shattered completely. The smug, high-flying executive vanished in an instant, replaced by a terrified, cornered animal, his face drained of color as the reality of his miscalculation set in. He opened his mouth to formulate a lie, to spin a new narrative, but the time for negotiations had expired. I didn't ask why, I stated, cutting off his panic. I didn't cry. I just handed the flash drive Jessica gave me, along with the forged affidavits, directly to the authorities. He bolted out of his chair, knocking his wine glass onto the hardwood floor. Jessica? You talked to Jessica. Mum, you have to listen to me. She's crazy. He stopped. In the distance, the faint, undeniable wail of police sirens began to echo through the quiet suburban neighborhood. The sound grew louder, sharper, zeroing in on my address. I sat perfectly still, my posture straight, my hands folded on the table. I watched the flashing red and blue lights paint the walls of my dining room. I watched his empire of fraud dissolve into the air. This wasn't revenge. It was accounting. The arrests were swift and methodical. The police didn't knock. They demanded entry. Watching Michael being handcuffed in my foyer wasn't a tragedy. It was the final signature on a closed account. He tried to lock eyes with me as they read him his rights, attempting to deploy a final, desperate plea for maternal intervention. I simply looked away and picked up the shattered pieces of the wine glass he had knocked over. I was already calculating the cleanup costs and the legal fees required to untangle his mess. Michael's trial was a formality. Sarah's documentation was bulletproof. The forged affidavits, the offshore accounts, the fraudulent credit lines. It was a labyrinth of white-collar crime that the prosecution navigated with surgical precision. He was denied bail, deemed a flight risk due to the hidden assets we had exposed. He is currently serving a 20-year sentence in a federal penitentiary. I have not visited him. I do not intend to. I'd been the silent investor in their version of family, and now I realized it had been a subscription, with me footing the bill. That contract is terminated. Jessica emerged from the shadows once Michael was safely behind bars. We met at the district attorney's office to formally clear her name. The process of untangling the financial mess he had wrapped around her was tedious, requiring months of legal filings and credit disputes. But we approached it as a joint venture. I hired a specialized attorney to expedite her asset recovery. It was the least I could do as a dividend for the truth she had brought me in that alley. She is rebuilding her life now. She moved out of state, enrolled in a graduate program, and has reclaimed the identity that my son tried to steal. We don't speak often. We are bound by a shared transaction rather than a natural affinity, but there is a profound, silent respect between us. We were the collateral damage in Michael's business plan, and together we engineered his bankruptcy. As for me, I am finally free. The fraudulent debts accumulated under my name were discharged by the courts. My credit is restored. The life insurance policies were voided. The financial chains he built, link by link, have been completely shattered. I sold the suburban house with its large dining room. The overhead was too high for a single woman, and the memories were a depreciating asset. I moved into a sleek, modern condominium in the city center. It requires zero maintenance and offers absolute security. I spend my days managing my investments, serving on the board of a local educational foundation, and enjoying the quiet predictability of a perfectly balanced ledger. People in my social circle whispered, "Of course." They marveled at my stoicism. They wondered how a mother could dismantle her own son's life without a breakdown. They didn't understand that grief is a luxury reserved for those who lose something of value. I lost nothing. I merely identified a toxic asset and liquidated it before it could destroy my portfolio. Looking back on the wreckage and the rebuilding, I've come to realize that the concept of unconditional love we're told to give family is a dangerous trap when that family chooses to be predatory. Society conditions us to believe that blood requires infinite forgiveness, that a shared last name is a lifelong mandate to endure whatever damage is inflicted upon us. But love should never be a blank check for abuse, and family should never be an excuse for exploitation. True wisdom isn't just knowing when to love, it's knowing when to stop protecting someone from the weight of their own actions. Forgiveness isn't always for the other person. Sometimes it's the only way to set yourself free. And sometimes that forgiveness simply means accepting who they truly are and walking away completely. I had to forgive myself for not seeing Michael's true nature sooner, but I never had to forgive his crimes to find my own profound peace. It took severing the deepest tie a mother can have to learn that my loyalty must first belong to my own survival. I used to believe that defending my son was my ultimate duty, but a predator does not become a victim simply because you gave birth to him. The hardest truth to accept is that the people who know us best are often the ones best equipped to destroy us. They know our blind spots, they bank on our devotion, they weaponize our empathy against us. If you are sitting in the dark right now, wondering how much more you are supposed to take from someone who uses your love as a weapon, please listen to me. You do not owe anyone your sanity. You do not owe anyone your financial ruin. You do not owe anyone your life. Cutting a toxic person out of your world to save your own isn't an act of malice. If you've ever had to cut a toxic person out of your life to save your own, you aren't the villain, you're the survivor. The peace you find on the other side of that impossible decision is worth every ounce of the grief it takes to get there. You rebuild your foundation. You balance the scales of justice. You reclaim your future from those who tried to steal it. You realize that true family is built on respect, not just a shared bloodline. It takes incredible courage to face the reality of a toxic relationship, especially when society tells you to look the other way. But standing in the light of your own truth is the most empowering choice you will ever make. The moment you stop normalizing their cruelty is the exact moment you take your power back. You step out of the illusion and into a life where your well-being is no longer up for negotiation. If you've ever had to take a stand against someone you loved, I want to hear your story. Drop a comment below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of justice.